Sound speeds, and welcome back to the Speed Bumps podcast, the podcast that takes place during my drive home from set. Now, this is episode 14. Why 14, you may ask? Didn't I only commit to an additional 3? I did, but I'm still not 100% happy with the way that some things are turning out in the workflow, in the way that things are working. I mean, obviously, I'd like to have different cameras. I would like to have, a couple of different indoor or rather car plants and stuff like that. I just don't want to spend the money right now. I have other things I would rather do, and those are all wish list items. And let the truth be known, it's going to be fine. It's going to work out just fine. You're going to be able to hear me. I know how to place a microphone. The picture is going to be a little crazy, but hey, it is what it is. Luckily, last night when I was shooting episode 15, and yes, that's a little bit of insider information, I was shooting it and came to learn something, that if I happen to have headlights blasting me in the face right here, you know how it's got this like whiteness that you see over my eyes, but if I flip the little switch on the bottom of my mirror, I can still see the headlights. I know where cars are, but that's the whole purpose of it, to not be blinded at night. And it's better for the exposure on the camera. So you're going to see it a little bit different in this episode, but you're going to see me actually come to the realization in episode 15. So a little bit of insider information there. If you tune in, you will hear this in the next episode of Speed Bumps. But as of now, I still have no plans to release more than 15. But regardless, let's not waste any more time and let's get on into our question. My question is, how do you best record audio outdoors when it's raining? I can cover my camera and operate it without issues, but I haven't worked out audio. Lots of issues of noise with rain hitting the camera, rain cover, and or umbrella. The question is a good one. How do we deal with it in the sound department? Obviously, we're not going to be able to convince the camera department to take the plastic that they have protecting the cameras off the camera, just so that way it gets rained on. We're still going to hear a little bit of the sound there. Nor are we going to be able to convince them to not use umbrellas or to take off their raincoats simply because we want to get the noise floor of the rain down a little bit. Nor can we go and wrap them all in hog's hair. That's not going to go over very well either. And I hate to tell you this, but things like water-resistant spray is not going to actually make the water float off of any of these surfaces and fall down to the ground without making some noise as well. So those are not the solutions. Here's what I will tell you though. When you're talking about rain, the thing is, we see it. When we see something, we can hear it. So when we're talking about rain and it is backlit, you're going to actually see the rain on camera. If it's not backlit, you're not going to see it nearly as much. And that's one of the little tricks to lighting that you're going to come to find out is if you do a scene and there's a whole lot of rain taking place in the scene and you see the rain, that's fine. You can hear it, you can see it, and they're going to always backlight that rain from the different angles because you're going to want to see the rain consistently throughout the scene. Now, if it's not raining and then suddenly it starts raining, the DP is suddenly going to do a lot softer lights from behind because they're going to still want a hair light effect, but they're not going to want to see the raindrops. And so unless it's like, very visible and like, leave someone alone for 3 seconds and they're going to be soaked, that's when they're going to end up having, potentially to take you in out of the rain for a bit because you can't have actors go from dry to wet over the course of a 2-minute long sequence. So when you're talking about rain and you want it to be visible, you backlight it. If you don't want it to be visible, you front light it. And that's the gist of the lighting aspect of it. But what about the sound? Well, again, if we are recording the sound and suddenly it starts raining, you're going to hear it because everyone's going to cover up their cameras and everything in plastic, and you're going to end up having additional noise coming from rain hitting things. What does happen, though, is it creates kind of an overall wash type sound. It sounds within a certain frequency range. It basically sounds like, I don't want to say white noise, but it kind of sounds like that at the same time. It just sounds like the noise floor came up. It will be, you will hear the different sounds of the raindrops, and it will sound like there's raindrops hitting, different things. Because it's not just a constant, everything is being blended together. But you really can't do a whole lot about it. So what you can do and control is you can, like if there's a downspout, You can you put hogshair underneath that to stop the rain from coming down and making, make it sound like a drain. If there's water that's coming out of a gutter that's overflowing, you can put a hogshair on the ground there to silence that. Just the same kind of thing that you would any kind of noise. Like if there's a fountain or something like that, and you have to have the fountain on for visibility's sake in the picture, you put hogshair underneath it to quiet it down. As a matter of fact, I have a video about a trick that I use when I want to keep, because if you put hogshair at the bottom of like a bucket or something like that, rain hits it, water hits it, and it raises up over the water level. The water level raises up over that of the hogshair, and suddenly it's going to start dripping again. So I have a solution for that, and I'll post the video right up there in a card so that you can check it out. It's a pretty cool little video. But is there really anything you can do? Give post a heads up. That's really it. You can try to spot treat anything you want, but unfortunately, the nature of the beast is rain is going to make a sound, and you're not going to be able to convince anybody to take off the rain covers, especially over electronic devices, especially those that are very expensive, like the camera or the operators or something like that. It's just not something you can ask them to do. They're not going to remove it, so it's kind of useless asking. Now, one thing you can do, and I've sometimes seen this happen, if it's an accidental rain that happens and you haven't really started the scene and they're planning on shooting through it, sometimes you can talk to the DP and ask them if they could perhaps use longer lenses, if that is something that is possible. Now, they may say, stay in your lane. This is, we have a plan here. This is what you're supposed to do. But you can also talk to your mixer and say, can I approach them about using longer lenses? That way we get a little bit more distance between all the plastic getting hit with rain and our talent. Sometimes they'll go for that. If not, you're just going to have to play the pattern of the microphone away from that and make sure that your microphones are protected against rain. And that's going to be from using something like a Rain Man from Remote Audio. The Sinella Pia Kelly is a great solution. There's the Duck. Actually the Duck probably not going to be as good. But there's different solutions you will have. Even if you want to wrap it in hogshair and go old school with it, there's different solutions you will have available to you. If you want to try to minimize that, mainly playing patterns off of microphones, you might end up saying, well, you as a boom operator will just suffer it up and get rained on. I mean, the thing is, though, in the world of iZotope RX, they can do a lot to get out the sounds that are undesirable. They can easily dial in a dialogue isolate. They can easily adjust things. One thing you can do, even though this is somewhat frowned upon, and you might want to mention it to your mixer first about approaching the DP, is you can tell them if it's an accidental rain, it wasn't planned on, and it just starts raining, and the scene really hasn't gotten into the coverage or something like that, you can ask them if it is possible for them to use a little bit longer lenses to cover the scene. That way the camera and all the rainmakers, all the raindrops and stuff like that are going to be farther away from the actors. Now, they may or may not go for that, but it's at least a possibility, and you might want to mention it to your sound mixer and see what they think about that, because they may say, oh, that's a great idea. What's the worst they're going to do? Tell you no. True. But it's also one of those things that if the scene has already been, covered in one direction, you're just trying to pick up the last angle, they're going to do matching sizes. They're not going to suddenly go long lens if they shot on a 35 mil and they were this far away from the actor. They're not going to suddenly say, yeah, sure, we'll go 120 mil lens and, back up 20 feet. They're not going to do that. They're gonna continue with the plan, and they're gonna continue to shoot, but only if it starts raining and they say, you know what, we're gonna go ahead and shoot this scene in the rain, and that's gonna be what we're dealing with here. So just suck it up. And everyone's gonna put on their rain protection. Everyone's gonna be making noise from plastic being, hit by rain and whatever. In those circumstances, if you haven't already started shooting the sequence, you can sometimes convince them to shoot it on longer lenses. That way you're putting a little bit of distance between. Some DPs will go for it, some will not. But, I do know boom operators that will sometimes say, well, I'm not going to wear rain protection then. I'm just going to get rained on. Here's the thing. There's going to be so many sounds out there from rain hitting something. It's going to be hitting gutters. It's going to be hitting trees, tree leaves. It's going to be hitting, shingles on a roof. They're going to be hitting everything, the ground even, everything. And so if you take off your rain protection, you extend out the pole, 8 feet, Maybe if you're that concerned about it, I mean, you're just going to make yourself miserable. If you're that concerned about it, extend out the pole 12 or 15 feet and wear your rain protection and and that's going to drop the noise floor a little bit, especially if you play the pattern of the microphone effectively. You might want to choose a longer microphone, so that way you're trying to cut out some of the background noise of the rain hitting everything around. Because if you have a wider pattern, it's going to be more difficult for them to. It's going to be more of that noise that gets into the microphone. A more narrow pattern, a shotgun, short or long, is going to be much better for trying to remove some of that rain sound. So I mean, you just got to kind of listen. You got to think about it. You got to pick at it a little bit. Try a couple of different things before you're rolling, and see what you can do, because you're not going to be able to defeat nature. Even if they were to come out with and say, we're going to put out short of one thing I have seen is when there was an Adam Sandler movie here that shot a few years ago, and they came out with like, what was it, an 80 by 80 floating grid over the set, because they knew it was going to be raining one day, and they basically gridded it out. Maybe it was 100 by 100 or some crazy huge thing. I have a picture someplace. I doubt I'll be able to find it, but if I can, I'll put it up on the screen right now. And basically what it was is it was basically covering, it was about 30 or so feet over set. They used it for lighting, but it was also preventing the actors from being rained on in the scene. So it was this humongous thing. It might have been 50 by 50 for all I remember, but it was held up by a crane. I just remember seeing the picture and thinking that was really cool. But I don't think that a lot of shows are going to be doing that kind of thing just for rain. Obviously, if they can move a scene someplace where it's not going to be rained on, that's even better. But, hey, it is what it is. So give post a heads up. Aside from that, though, I'm sorry, dude. You're just going to have to deal with the rain. And Post is going to have to as well just do your very best, do your due diligence, and don't make yourself miserable out there in the meantime. For the pro sound topic in this episode, I thought I would discuss when it's appropriate to shut down a camera. Now you may say, how can we make that decision? We're just sound. Why does it matter? Well, it matters if you're doing coverage like this at the same time as you're doing a wide shot with 15 feet of headroom. That's not really going to be conducive to getting coverage unless it's a lock off and they start with the plate and you do the invisible boom trick, which is, something I taught about right there. But what I will say is that if you are able to do the invisible boom trick, that will be awesome, and you then therefore do not need to shut down any cameras. But if you are running two different sizes that prevent you from getting the coverage that they're going for at the same time, because they're doing a wider shot, ask if they will shut down the tighter shot and just run the wide by itself. Or ask, here's another question I've also asked, is if there is another wide shot that they're going to try to get, and if so, do we owe a secondary angle of a wide shot? If so, can we do that at the same time as the other wide? Widen out the camera. Can you do that as opposed to get coverage at the same time? Sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, well, we owe a wide shot from the right angle. Well, that's great. Let's do those two at the same time. Yes, we'll do that for you. They'll sometimes do that. Sometimes they'll say, we don't owe enough. This is the wide shot. If that's the case, then ask if you can shut down any coverage. But there's a caveat here. You don't want to shut it down unless you're going to gain something on the boom. If you're shooting in a noisy downtown environment and your mixer is playing the lavs because basically there is no other way to defeat the bad noise of the city, then you can fight for the boom. But if you listen and you throw the boom out there during a rehearsal and you're just nothing but getting noise in there with someone who's talking very quietly as they're walking, then obviously you're not going to gain anything by shutting down the tight shot and just doing the wide by itself. You might as well just run the lavs at that point, because you're not going to get anything on the boom track. So don't shut it down and use that favor up unless you know it's going to be useful to you. If you know that the track is going to be better if you could get a boom over it, you're doing a walk and talk in a quiet area, you're doing a long lens, for example. Sometimes there'll be a wide shot looking down a sidewalk and there'll be a long lens. Well, you may look at that and say, well, I could easily boom that. But then think about it. Do you have signs? Do you have telephone posts or something like that that's going to be in your way when you're booming? You're going to have to go up and over them? Because if so, that's not going to be very conducive to you booming that that tight as they're walking down the road. Now, if you can't stay down on them, in that case, you might just go ahead and play the lavs too. So you have to be diplomatic about this. Only shut down the tight cameras when you are going to gain something by having a boom over it. Maybe even the noise, the clip-cloppy shoes that you're seeing on the wide shot, you say, well, we just, it's going to be outrageous. And the actor says, no, I have to have these shoes because I don't want to wear the comfy ones down on the streets here. No, I have to wear those. That's what I have to wear. Well, if you can't foot foam them because it's concrete outside and it's going to just wear off after a few steps and it's a lost cause, if they don't want to wear softer, quiet shoes, if you cannot put down carpets, 100 feet or whatever down the sidewalk, then by all means, you may end up having to just play the lavs because there's no way to boom it otherwise. Now, you could always underboom it, but then you have to get the exact right angle. Then if you end up having to go over go over something like around a telephone pole, maybe that someone is talking and the other person's talking on the phone, and then there's an opportunity for you to lift up the boom and bring it down, and you're not going to miss any of the on-camera dialogue. If that's the case, you're not going to be able to underboom as easily because you're going to have to go around something. But, who knows? There's always a situation and an opportunity to shut down the tight cameras. Now, why don't you shut down the wide? They owe a wide shot. If they owe a wide shot, they're going to want to get the wide shot. And if they get the wide shot out of their system, then you can go in for coverage and get that. But they got to do the wide. So ask them to do the wides by themselves without a tight involved. Now, if you shut down the wide and you just run the tight, then they'll just say, well, we're going to have to come back and do the wide anyway, so why don't we just do this now? Then it's a lost cause. You've shut down the camera that is the trouble camera because you didn't like it. Well, play the trouble camera with the lav. Now, I do know that sometimes they'll say something really foolish to you like, well, can't we just play the lavs? Well, you can, but the kind of thing that I usually will end up firing back with, I'll say, why don't we just do coverage with a GoPro? I mean, that's basically the equivalent of me playing the lavs for the coverage. Why don't we just shoot the coverage with a GoPro? It doesn't match. And Ken Strain has another wonderful suggestion that I recently read about in one of the forums. One of the things he will say is, so what you're telling me is that you want to tell me and limit my tools for my ability to capture this performance because you don't want to shut down and do the tights together and the wides together. You want to limit my ability to pull out this performance by limiting the number of tools that I can use to capture the performance. I forgot the exact wording, but it was very good wording, but you see where I'm going with it. Sometimes you will catch people that they'll say, there's no way we're going to be able to make our day unless we run these together. I'm sorry, sound department, but I am signing off on this. The director may say, I'm signing off of this. The producer, UPM, somebody may say, nope, we got to get our day. Sun is setting and we got to get this scene done. If we don't get this scene done now, we're not going to have it. And we have like 10 shots we have to get. The sun goes down in an hour and a half, so we're in fast mode. So I'm sorry, we're going to have to run the wides and tights together. And in that case, if they sign off on it, your mixer is most likely going to say, well, okay. I have worked for mixers, though, that will still push. And I had one mixer in particular, I'm not going to name him, but he said to me when I said, well, the director is not concerned with it. The first AD is not going to shut this down, is not going to whatever else. He's not concerned with it. The mixer straight up said to me, well, I am. So we're going to have to push harder. And I'm like, yikes. As soon as you do that, you are throwing as a mixer, you are throwing your boom operator under the bus because the first AD and director and no producer is going to have your back. And if you start pushing really hard to try to get something to happen to make your sound mixer happy, you're going to be really irritating the powers that be, the higher ups, the director, first AD, and it's you that is in the line of fire. That is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. I've been there and I did not like it one bit. And that's what I tried talking to the mixer, but the mixer was just like, that's what we have to do. Our job is to get the very best sound possible. And he wouldn't listen to reason. And yes, that is a reason. I mean, that is a reasonable thing. That is not listening to reason, because a reasonable thing would be the director, the production is not concerned with it. We're just going to use the very best possible tracks we can get. We're going to get the best. We're not going to cut corners, but if there is a way for us to get something, we will do it. Even if it means trying to get wild lines of something later, or trying to if we see an opportunity to shut down. Or one of the things I'll also say is if the director says, no, we're going to definitely run the wides and the tights together, is one of the things I'll say is, okay, if you get what you need to out of that wide shot, would you shut it down so I could get the coverage? Because, you know, most of the time the scene lives in the coverage. That's where the story is. So if you could if you get what you need to out of that wide, can you give me, you know, at least, and then they may say, yeah, sure, you know, let's do a couple of takes and then I'll shut down the wide. Great. Then you could get your shots, and they still got their shots. I have worked for DPs before. They're saying, we still don't have it, because here's the thing. You got a wide shot. There's more stuff in it. And if a background is crazy over there or something falls apart, they may say, we got to run the wide again, because they got to get the background to look right. And if that's the case, you may already have it in the coverage, and they say, well, let's go tighter down. And then you're like frustrated because you don't want to sacrifice that because you're still running the wides, but you still don't have the wide. And you're just going to have to suck it up, because that's the nature of the beast when the sun is setting and there's elements against you. And then the powers that be are against you. So in the sound department, we still have to be diplomatic. We still have to do everything we possibly can to get our tracks. And if they are not willing to work with you, some mixers will just sign off on it. They'll say, well, you know what? We don't have to care anymore. Some mixers will say, okay, well, we're going to do some alternate things and see if we can do everything we possibly can, pull out every trick of the trade we possibly can, and we're going to get this sound. Sure, we're going to still get it anyway. But unfortunately, that may mean having to use a lav. So a mixer may get mad at you, but you know what? It's not you. If a mixer does fire you because you did not push as hard as they wanted you to, so be it. You don't need to work with that mixer. Mixer may have won Academy Awards or may get great results and be an A-list mixer that you just really want to work with. But here's the thing. You don't need that on you. If you are doing everything you possibly can and you're not just using it as an opportunity to slack off, I don't need to worry about this. If you still are trying to get the very best possible tracks you can, you should not be blamed for that. Nor should the mixer, if the director signs off on it, have the mixer write a note. The director will, I mean, you don't need to tell the mixer to make a note. The mixer should make a note and say, post, director and production was not concerned with this, so it is what it is. Sorry. But they got to eat too, as some mixers will tell you. Post guys got to eat, ADR guys got to eat. But that is, in a nutshell, when it is appropriate to shut down a camera. So there you have it, episode 14 of the Speed Bumps podcast in the can. I do appreciate you tuning in and listening and staying, staying with me as long as you do. It's really weird because there's always, when you first do a YouTube video, there's going to be people that start the video and it will trickle off pretty quickly. And that's partially related to people that do scrolling on a main page. They mouse over something and it starts playing the video, or you're on your phone and you're scrolling and you hover over a video too long and it starts auto playing. Part of that could be there. But it's also when you are recording a video and you play it, sometimes it just doesn't, you don't cut enough and you don't make it interesting enough and someone clips off. Episodes like this, there's not a whole lot of editing aside from, blurring the background and me putting up the cards and stuff like that I normally do, sometimes pictures, something like that. There's not a whole, most of the production of this comes down to the processing of audio that I do in post, the synchronization of this kind of garbage security camera with the audio, which also requires me to stretch the picture to match the sound, because I'll tell you this, over the course of the, what are you doing, buddy? Stay in your lane. Because over the course of a 30-minute recording or 20 minutes or however long it happens to be, there is drift. This camera here is not capable of maintaining 29.97 frame rate, which matches the recording frame rate. It's not capable of it. And because it's not capable of it, guess what? It's never going to be an exact match, and so I'm going to have to stretch the audio or stretch the video. Or, shrink it a little bit, compress it a little bit. Squish it. I'm not going to, though. I'm going to... Did it stop recording sound? No, we're still recording sound. So, what I will do, though, is I will sacrifice the picture. I mean, geez, this camera here is already looking goofy enough. If it drops a frame rate of 29.97 to 29.93, are you really going to tell? Are you really going to tell if I end up having to compress it a little bit and it goes to 30? it's still going to, the raw footage is maybe 30 because I have to compress it a little bit. But still, this video is going to render out 29.97, and you're going to be watching it on YouTube and 30 or 29.97. Either way. But regardless, I know I get off on tangents. I'm sorry about that. But here's the thing. I'm going to prioritize the sound. The sound is going to be the main thing that I care about here. I'm going to process that. I'm going to shoot this on my drive home, and it takes a little while to set everything up and make sure it's set up. Then when I get home, I have to take everything down, put it away, import it into the computer, recharge everything, stuff like that. So that's part of the process of what I'm doing here. If I had a better option for recording night, footage, I'd do that. If I had a different option for my sound, I would probably do that too, because as much as I like a lav, I'm not 100% sure it is the best approach here, because after you run it through something like Clarity VX, it's going to cut in a little bit on those frequencies, and it may not be ideal for what the sound should be in the Speed Bumps podcast. I'm going to have to make this determination, and this is part of the process and thinking about things that I have as I go forward. That and the watch time. The watch time of a 20-minute long episode of the Speed Bumps podcast on average is around 9 to 10 minutes. If the podcast is longer, 25, 30 minutes, it will probably go up a little bit too. Some people are going to watch only a few minutes and skip around, hopefully get the information, then leave. Some people might tune out after the opening and say, no, I don't want this. I'm going to watch something else. Some people have told me, and they write in the comments, they say that they watch this while they're at work. They leave it on, and I'm basically providing them the vocal equivalent of Muzak in the background while they work. And they say, I sometimes have to go back a little bit to make sure I completely understood something that you said, but still, they do that. But anyway, I appreciate you staying here to the very, very end. And I guess that's it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Speed Bumps Podcast, episode 14. And be sure to tune in the future for more episodes on this channel of maybe the Speed Bumps Podcast, at least episode 15. You know that's coming. And as always, sound advice.
If you'd like to ask a sound-related question to be answered in a future episode, send text, audio, or video to ssp@soundspeeds.us. Want to record this outro? Details in the description below. Find us on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content.